Hello everyone, this is Sudhir Kumar Dwivedi, Assistant Professor of Law from Gemtech School of Law, Greater Noida. The topic for today's lecture is the examination of the witnesses under the subject Law of Evidence. So, the Indian Evidence Act 1872, Chapter 10, Section 135 to Section 166 deals with the provisions of examination of witnesses, and Order 18 and 39 of the code of 41 of the Code of Civil Procedure and Chapter 17, 19, 21 and 29 of the Code of the Criminal Procedure Code provides the order in which the witness are to be produced and examined. Where there is no provision of law in this code, then the witnesses are to be produced and examined in the order decided at the discretion of the court. So, order and production of the examination of witness, Section 135 of the Indian Evidence Act provides that the order in which the witnesses are produced and examined shall be regulated by law and practice for the time being in relating to the civil and criminal procedure respectively, and in absence of any such law, by the discretion of the court. And in civil proceeding, this section deals with the order in which witnesses are to be examined in civil suits. The plaintiff has right to begin. The other party has been to state his case and produce evidence. The plaintiff may then prove his case and rebuttal, if any. In civil appeals, the appellant is first heard. If the court doesn't dismiss the appeal at once, respondent is heard again. The appeal, and in such cases, the appellant is entitled to reply. And in criminal proceedings, it is the complainant or the prosecutor that has the right to begin, and the accused may then lead evidence if he so choose. In criminal appeals, the appellant begins, and if necessary, the other side is then heard. So this is the order. In a nutshell, it can be said that primarily it is the lawyer's privilege to determine the order in which the witness should be produced and examined. The arrangement of witness is a matter of experience and skill, though the counsel has discretion to produce his witness in order to he likes. This section gives the court a power to dictate the order in which the witness may be produced, and we know that we have already discussed that the order 38, order 18, 20, 21, 22 and 28 of the CRPC deal with the manners of the examination of witness. We have discussed these things. Now let's see what section 136 provides. Section 136 related with the judges to decide the admissibility of the evidence. When either party proposes to give evidence of any fact, the judge may ask the party proposing to give the evidence in what manner the alleged fact, if proved, would be relevant, and the judge shall admit the evidence if he thinks that the fact, if proved, would be relevant and not otherwise. If fact proposed to be proved is one of which evidence is admissible only upon proof of some other fact, such fact must be proved before evidence is given of the fact first mentioned, unless the party undertake to give the proof of such fact and the court is satisfied with such undertaking. and if the relevancy of the alleged fact depends upon another alleged fact being first proved, the judge may in his discretion either permit evidence of the first fact to be given before the second fact is proved, or require evidence to be given of the second fact before evidence is given of the first fact. Let's see some illustration. Suppose A is proposed to prove a statement about a relevant fact by a person who is alleged to be dead, when such statement is relevant under section 32. The fact that the person is dead must be proved by the person proposing to prove the statement before evidence is given of the statement, because the primary requirement of the dying declaration is that the person must be dead. So before proving the statement of the dying declaration, the person has to establish that the person is dead. And suppose just take another example. Suppose it is proposed to prove by a copy the contents of a document said to be lost. The fact that the original is lost must be proved by the person proposing to produce the copy before the copy is produced. Otherwise, we know that the rule is that the rule of best evidence is that the primary document should be presented before the court, and there are certain circumstances under section 65 of the Indian Evidence Act only when the secondary evidence is allowed. So before producing the secondary evidence, it is important to prove that the primary evidence is lost. In the same way, just take another illustration example. Suppose A is accused of receiving stolen property knowing it to have been stolen. So if it is proposed to prove that he denied the possession of the property, then it will be relevant to helpful to judge to decide some inference, because if he denied to take the possession of the property, then it is obviously just there will be inference that he was not aware of the regarding the stolen property, because the relevancy of the denial depends on the identity of the property. The court may in its discretion either require the property to be identified before the denial of the possession is proved, or permit the denial of the possession to be proved before the property is intended. So these were some illustration. The scope of this section is that in order that only the relevant evidence may be brought on record, the present section has empowered the court to inquire of the party producing the evidence as to how and under what section the evidence offered is relevant. The section also empowers the court to control the sequence of the production of the evidence in cases where the proof of one fact is dependent on the proof of another fact. So in order that the proof may be confined to relevant facts and may not go beyond the proper limits of the issue at the trial, the judge is empowered to ask in what manner the evidence tendered is relevant. The judge must then decide its admissibility. The judge has to see that an evidence to be brought on the record must be relevant under the some of the section of the relevancy under the act. An argument based on the plausibility can have no effect. The court must, at the time when the evidence is tendered, decide whether or not it is admissible. It is the judge's duty to exercise a careful discretion. Now let's see that there is 3 stages in the examination of a witness are follows, that is examination in chief, cross-examination and re-examination. And section 137 talks about the examination in chief, cross-examination and re-examination. The examination of a witness by the party who calls him shall be called his examination in chief. It is also called as a direct examination. So when the party examines his own witness, it is examination in chief. A witness shall be first examined in chief, then the adverse party to desires cross-examined. Once the examination is chief is closed, then the other party may cross-examine. The object of this is that the object of the examination in chief is to make the witness depose to what he has been called by a party calling him to prove. In other words, the object of his examination is to get him from the witness all the material fact within his knowledge relating to the party's case. It must be confined to the relevant fact and no leading question can be asked except with the permission of the court. The limit is that the object of the examination in chief is to make the witness depose to what he has been called by the party calling him from the witness all material facts within his knowledge relating to the party's case. It must be confined to the relevant fact and no leading question can be asked except with the permission of the court. So now let's see the what is the cross examination. The examination of witness by the adverse party shall be called his cross examination. The limit is that it should be remembered that the witnesses must speak to fact and not the opinion, inference or belief. The object of the cross examination is to test the truth of the statement made by a witness. It is an attempt to break down a witness or to show his statement cannot be relied upon. So after the party calling a witness has finished the examination in chief, the opposite party has a right to cross examination the witness, and the cross examination, if properly conducted, is one of the most useful and efficacious means of discovering the truth. And we know that the cross examination is not confined to matters proved in examination in chief. The slightest examination in the chief, even for a formal proof, gives right to cross examination to put question about the whole of his case. Now, re-examination. The re-examination of a witness subsequent to the cross-examination by the party who called him shall be called the re-examination. And the object of the re-examination is to afford to the party calling a witness an opportunity of filling in lacuna or explaining the inconsistencies which the cross-examination has discovered in examination in chief of the witness. So the basic purpose of the re-examination is explanation of matters arising in cross-examination. The proper purpose for re-examination is by asking question as may be proper to draw forth an explanation or meaning of the expression used by the witness in cross-examination if they are doubtful. New matters may, however, be introduced by permission of the court, and if that is done, then the adverse party has a right to cross-examination the witness on that point. So what will be the order? We have discussed that however the section 130 of the 138 of the Indian Evidence Act deals with the order of the examination. So witness shall be first examined in chief. If the adverse party so desires, then the cross examination, and then if the party calling him so desires, re-examined. The examination and the cross examination must relate to the relevant facts, but the cross examination need not to be confined to the fact which the witness testified on his examination in chief. Now the direction of the re-examination. The re-examination shall be directed to the explanation of the matters referred to in the cross examination, and if new matters by the permission of the court introduced in the examination, then obviously the adverse party must have the right to the cross examination upon that point only. Now the section 139 of the Indian Evidence Act provide that cross examination of a person who called to produce a document, someone to produce a document does not become a witness by the mere fact that he produces it, and cannot be cross examined unless and until he is called as a witness. Then section 141 is related with the leading question. Any question suggesting the answer which the person putting it witness or expects to receive is called the leading question. So the leading question is a leading one when it indicates to the witness the real or supposed fact which the examiner expects and desires to be confirmed by the answer. Like, is not your name Syam? So here the indication is that he is expecting that he should accept that he is Syam. Do you reside in at Allahabad? So the nature of the question is that the examiner is expecting some answer that yes, he is residing in Allahabad, suggesting the answer. And are you not in service of Syam? Have you not lived for 10 years with Syam? These are some examples of the leading question. Section 142, when they must not be asked. When they must means when the leading question may not be asked. So leading question must not, if objected to by the adverse party, be asked in examination in chief or in re-examination except with the permission of the court. So with the permission of the court, leading question may be asked even in the examination in chief and re-examination. And the court shall permit the leading question as to the matter which are introductory or undisputed or which have in its opinion been already sufficiently proved. Leading question may be asked in cross examination under section 143. Okay, now let's see the section 144 evidence as to the matters in writing. Any witness may be asked whilst under examination whether any contract, grant or other disposition of property as to which he is giving evidence was not contained in a document, and if he says that it was, or if he is about to make any statement as to the contents of any document which in the opinion of the court ought to be produced, the adverse party may object to such evidence being given until such document is produced or until the facts have been proved which entitle the party who called the witness to give secondary evidence of it. So a witness may give oral evidence of the statement made by other person about the contents of a document if such documents are themselves relevant. Let's see one illustration. The question is whether A assaulted B, and C deposes that he heard A says to D, B wrote a letter accusing me of theft and I will be revenged on him. This statement is relevant as showing A's motive for the assault, and the evidence may be given of it, though no other evidence is given about the latter. So this section merely points out the manner in which the provisions of section 91 and 92 of the Indian Evidence Act as to the exclusion of oral by documentary evidence may be enforced by the party to the suit. So the basic general principle under section 91 and 92 of the Indian Evidence Act is that if any covenant or contract has been drafted in a document, then the document is to be produced before the court. And this section 144 provides when some statement is allowed regarding the matters in writing. So if you see the language, that any witness may be asked whilst under the examination whether the any contract, grant or the requisition of property as to which he is giving evidence was not contained in document, and if he says yes it was, or if you about to make a statement as to the content of the document which in the opinion of the court are to be produced, the adverse party may object of such evidence being given until such document is produced or until facts have been proved which entitle the party who called the witness to give secondary evidence. So adverse party may take always the plea that the document should be presented. However, some you can say that relevant statement showing motive evidence may be given, though no other evidence. Regarding the contents of the document, the document must be produced. Now, sixth illustration we have discussed this. Now, when the witness to be compelled to answer, section 147 says that if any such question relates to a matter relevant to the suit or proceeding, the provision of section 132 shall apply. So section 165 of the Indian Evidence Act gives power to judges to put question in order questions or order the production. The judge may, in order to discover or to obtain the proper proof of relevant facts, ask any question he pleases in any form at any time of the any witness or of the parties about any fact relevant or irrelevant, and may order the production of any document or thing, and neither the parties nor the agent shall be entitled to make any objection to any such question or order, nor without the leave of the court. The Orient Traven cross examination any witness upon any answer given in reply to any such question. So here provided that the judgment must be based upon the fact declared by this act to be relevant and duly proved. Here the wide power has been given to the judges. They may ask any question to the parties, whether relevant or irrelevant. However, one restriction has been imposed on them, that the judgment must be based on the relevant fact. That's all about the examination of the witnesses. Thank you.